Let's get started. My name is Tim. I'm technical support and installation engineer at ATRsoft. In today's webinar, we will have a look at projects and how to use them. With me today, I have Francois Simon, who will answer your questions. You can use the chat box and the GoToWebinar panel. I will make room after the session for more questions so that you follow the presentation better. We expect this webinar to take somewhere in the range of 30 minutes, and the webinar will be recorded and made available online later on. Okay, let's get started. First, let's try to highlight why projects are useful in the first place. If you are working on many different projects and each project has to be saved to a project folder, then you should use projects. You can predefine a save location per project and ensure that files go to the correct location in no time. If you have values you always need to define for every file you create, like for instance a customer name, an address, email, telephone number and so on, then use projects. You can define these as default values and only type it in one time when the project is defined. You can set anything as a default value. Is each project using different file naming rules? No problem, just use projects. And if you convert your files, it would be a great benefit to use also project properties like the project number or the project name. Use it as save to location or similar to automate the way of working. So I'll open SOLIDWORKS now and show how to define a project and then explain a bit about default values. This will be a bit technical, so don't worry if you get lost. The goal for the webinar is not to instruct in detail how to define this, but show you how you could use projects. So into SOLIDWORKS. I'll just start by creating a file in SOLIDWORKS using a CustomTools project. So file new, and I have created a bracket template, so I'm not going to do a lot of modeling. You will see this bracket a lot of times during the past next 30 minutes. So let's create that one and go into CustomTools and then just go into properties. Now I want to use the CustomTools project for this, and I could define my properties now. I won't, I'll just hit OK. And what happened here? Well, actually we saved the file to the correct location and we gave it a file name, and this was done fully automated, no user interaction at all. So I'm going to do this one more time and try and explain a bit what is actually going on. So create a new bracket and go to the properties. Now because I load a project in the action group, I can actually predefine values that I want to load with this project. So for this one I'm loading a sequence called 1439, and this is actually my file name. So when I hit OK, the file will then be saved. And if I go into the options, I can explain this a bit better. We have the profile options active and the projects is highlighted. So this is our projects. And for the CustomTools project, I have some settings predefined. And these are how we save the file and where we save the file and other settings that we can put into a project. So for the CustomTools project, I use a property as file name called save to. And these properties are actually our model properties, which are defined for the profile we are using. So anything you see in this list actually comes from the model properties. And anything you define in here could be used for the projects. So I also have a save folder called eDesign. So anything I will save will go into this location. The reason we are not prompted with a save dialog during the save operation is because we actually suppress it by disallowing saving in a different location. So if you set a tick mark in this one, the user would then be allowed to browse outside the folder, give the file a different name and create folders and just do what you would normally do in a save operation. But for this project, this is not allowed. And the file name itself comes from a default value. So beneath the settings we have default values for parts, assemblies and drawings. So for the parts I'm loading a default sequence, and this is actually just a sequence number called file number, and this is then returned into my operation. So if I have a look at the Halidon group project, this is set almost identical. I retrieve a file code, but my settings do have the allow save. So if I create a file using the Halidon project, go to properties, select the Halidon, the code is already inserted into my sequence, and I can just hit save or OK to save the file. And this time the browse dialog show up. So now I can move up one level, or I can create folders if I wish to, or I could just save it to the specified location. So this is saved to eDesign Halidon Group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, and this is my project name and project number. And if you're paying really close attention to the options that I showed just a minute ago, you would notice that we didn't have this part defined as our save location. So this actually happens fully automated. And let me just show how that is done. So in my options, for the Halidon or the custom tools, I use a property called save to. For my general project, I use a different property as my file name. It's called DWNO. And I could have anything as a file name per project, so I'm not restricted in any way for this. But let's investigate why this actually is working, because it's clear that I'm saving into eDesign, and my general, I have put in the general folder as well. So what is going on? If I look at the save to property, I might be able to understand better what is going on. So in the save to, I'm using an edit box to retrieve a combination value. So using the data function, I get a combination. And you can define as many combinations as you would like. And if I remember, I can show you the flat bar, for instance. But in this case, we're using the save to. This doesn't make me any more clever right now. So if I want to understand what this combination is actually doing, I need to go into the model combination and then highlight the save to, which is the actual property retrieved into my property. So in this one, I'm using pname, it's my project name. Then I have a folder mark, it's a backslash, and I have pnum, it's my project number, and then another backslash, and then my drawing number. So how to define this? Well, if I go in and add a new combination and give it a name, then I can use my format string to build what I have down here. And for the project name, I can actually use some system values that we have in CustomTools, and we are able to retrieve the project number and name directly. We are able to retrieve the path for models and drawings. If a project is a sub-project, we are actually able to retrieve the parent of that sub-project, either the name or the number. And then we are able to also remove characters from either left or right of a string. And for a file name, that would probably not make any sense, but there are other circumstances where that could be a real benefit to remove characters. And then we have a Boolean expression, or else. So if I'm defining anything and the first criteria is not met, then we move on to the next string in this and try to resolve that. But I'm going to build this one, so I would put in the project name. I can then but actually show the first characters or the last characters of the project name, or I could remove the first or the last characters, but I'm not going to do that. And then I'm going to insert a folder mark, and then I will add the project number and another folder mark. The folder mark is actually just a backslash, but for aesthetics I don't like to put in a backslash here, and I can show you why. So this is just a backslash and then the drawing number. So this kind of mess up how this was intended to be. It's working perfectly, but I don't like this, so I'm cheating a bit and put in a folder mark doing exactly the same thing, but it's more aesthetic like this. So there it is. I defined the exact same sequence as I had down here, and this would then trick the save operation to create the folders, the project name, backslash, project number, backslash, and then the drawing. And this is how it's working actually. So let me just create a project for you guys. So now I want to create a new project. So to do that, I can select which level the project should belong to. So if I put it under the general, then I will get in this hierarchy. And if I wanted to put it beneath one of these projects, I could then select that one and add it as a child to that project. But I want it to be a root level, you could call it. So I would just add in a new project and name it webinar and today's date. And I have the option to copy settings. So anything that I defined in the project, I could copy directly into this project. So I could actually copy from the CustomTools project into the newly created one. So I'm not doing that, I'm just taking the general settings. So there is my new project, and I want to make sure that I'm saving not to the general location. And that should be okay. So let's test that. A new bracket, go into properties, and select the webinar. So the webinar does not automatically bring in a sequence for me. And also, I'm not getting the customer info inserted. I would actually like that to happen. I don't want to type in these 4 lines over and over again for the next 2,000 parts that I'm going to create. So I can define these as default values. But right now I need to save this file, so I will retrieve a file number and hit OK, and then save it. And save. And that file actually ended up in the wrong location, so I'm going to use the Explorer to find that file again. As you can see, it ended up in my root of the design folder, and that wasn't my intention. I want this to be in a webinar folder and then today's date folder, so I need to correct my project. So moving in here, the CustomTools and the Halodan group are using the save to, so I can actually just define the save to as my property used as file name, because doing that would then add the webinar and then the project number as well into the file name, and then when I save it, it would be created in the correct location. So hit OK to that, and then run one more time the properties. And this time I just want to make sure I move the file to the correct location, so I'm using in the actions group a rename and move command. I'm not going to rename the file, it's already set as it should, but I will just make sure I'm removing it or moving it. So in the design webinar and 2015-0702 is now where I'm going to save the file. So save that and open the Explorer, and you can see that now the file does not exist in the root anymore. It was actually deleted from hard drive, moved into webinar folder, and there it is. But there are some things that I would like to be more automated in this, because I don't want to type in the customer name and I don't want to retrieve a file code. So I want to move into the options one more time. And then for the webinar, I want to insert some predefined values. And actually I don't want to browse for the location anymore either. I just want to save the file. So default values, I want to use this and like so. And this is just making sure that I don't have to type this in for the next 1000 or 2000 parts. So now this is set on all the parts that I'm going to create from now on in this project. So really a time saver as well. And then retrieve the file code automatically and say OK. So now when I create a file using the webinar project, it should just retrieve the file code, and it did. It has populated the customer info, and when I hit OK, the file will just be saved to the correct location. And let me just open the location again. So there it is, 1442. So this is working exactly how it's supposed to be. So that's pretty awesome, I guess. Let me just close everything and go back to PowerPoint. So just to recap, in SOLIDWORKS we set a project, and for the project we define saving rules for location and which property to use during the save. We also added default values to save us from typing same values over and over again, and this is a real time saver. I understand it seems like no big deal, but it's really a time saver. So next, imagine that I have a really nice sequence defined, and I want to use this on many projects, but the requirement is that we start at 1 and then count up 1, 2, 3 for each project. So I don't want to go in project A like 1, 2, 3 and then move to project B and go 4, 5, 6. No, I want this to reset, so when I get to 3 and go to project B, I want number 1 for the first file at least. And that could go to project A 900, and then I pick up something in project B and I got to number 40, and then the next sequence is 41. And this could be done in two ways, I guess. You could define a sequence for each and every project that you have. That would take quite a bit of work and effort to do, and we wouldn't recommend that. We have a really simple trick to do this, and it's called a project-specific sequence numbering. So back into SOLIDWORKS. So just to make sure that you note this 100%, I'm going to create a few files for you. So first off is this one, and I'm going to create this in CustomTools. So the code is 43. Hit OK. The file is then saved, as you can see, 43. And then make a few copies. And I'm using this actions group to make copies of the file. And this is actually our next webinar scheduled at August 13th, where we are going to look at the actions. And you can do a lot of nice things with actions, so please stay tuned for that as well. Really useful for assemblies as well. So the next sequence was 43. I would then manually retrieve the next one because I'm doing a copy, and hit OK. I do not want to open the saved document, and I want to create one more copy. Next code, and this is then 45. OK, and no. So now in this project folder I have 43, 44, 45. So if I create a new file, this time using the webinar, I get 46. And for the next one, you might already have guessed, we get 47. And this is not what I want. I want to make sure that I'm actually switching the sequence between the projects. So I don't want to have any skipped numbers in my sequences. And we can actually do that pretty simple. So moving into the options again, I need to define a sequence. So for this one I will just add a new sequence. So that is sequences, add, and then define a sequence name. And define the max value, the next value, and then how that sequence is going to be formatted in our interface. So you can type in a static text and then add your sequence. And you can add more text. You can do it in any way you would like, actually. And the trick is to be using the use project specific sequence numbering. And this would actually just tell the SQL database to please keep an eye on my projects and where the sequence are in each project. So pretty simple stuff. I need to tie this new sequence to a model property, and I already prepared this a bit. So I created a running sequence. I didn't assign anything to it yet, so I will go to the button function and get code. And then I want to enable the awesome sequence for this one. And I need to go to my projects and have a look at 2 predefined projects as well. So again, I have cheated a bit on this one. So we have the first running and second running, and I have defined that I'm using awesome sequence as my file name. And like for CustomTools, this is actually a combination property. So if I go into my model combination, I can see the model, the combination in this one, awesome sequence, and it's exactly how the other one is: name, number, and sequence. And for the save to, I'm using drawing number. So the difference here is that I'm retrieving this one instead of this one. And let me just edit that one. So as you can see, the drawing number is this one and the sequence is that one. So this is why we have this naming conflict, if you could call it that, but it's the difference between these two. So that should be all set. And if I create a new file, go into my properties, and then use my first running, I do not get a default sequence because I'm not using that for this project. So I need to expand this group and then retrieve my file code. So here it is, my awesome sequence, and I can create a file in that. And for this project, for sure, I could just define the same default value, so I could retrieve the sequence automatically. And you can see that it's been saved to the correct location, the first running project 0. So that is file number 1. Create one more. And we get file number 2. And no. And then I'm going to create a new file using the second running project. And if everything is working as it should, then we should get file number 1 for this project. And we did. So this is how you can use one sequence across a lot of projects and really just make it more simple to be the cat admin for CustomTools. And if I go and explore into this folder, I can see that I created the files or the folders fully automatically by the save operation. So I have the second running and I have the first running with 2 files in it. So another place where we can use projects is in our search, and there is a project search, and this is exactly as the one you see if you're using properties. So I can now go in and search for webinar and find whatever files I created in the webinar. Or I could use the CustomTools first running and see what I have created in this project. So really easy to use projects because you do not have to do anything. They already exist in the search profile. So if you are using projects, they will be highlighted over here and you can use them straight away. No configuration is required for that. If I'm going to select, actually let me just clear the search and search everything. And someplace in here I have some training files. So if I load that one, I can, as you can see, I have nice previews as well in this search. So I can open a file directly from the search, or if a drawing exists, I can open that there are none for this one. So I will just open the model, and I can open as view only, which is the last design review, I guess, and then read only. So I'm just going to open this one. And this file was made without using CustomTools, and so it's not belonging to any project at all. So if I open my properties, I will have a no project, and this is only available if the file really is not part of a project. If you save a file in CustomTools, it will be part of the general project in normal circumstances, but legacy files or files that you get from a subcontractor or a vendor you see has a no project. And we are able to put these into a project, but mind you that for this to work we actually have to do a rename and move, because we may have a predefined save location and we are maybe using a different sequence. So this is why this, you could call it limitation, exists in CustomTools, but there are so many things going on with the projects that we cannot just apply a project to any old file. Okay, so back to PowerPoint. Actually, let me just close this first. Yeah. As more recap, using sequence we can define the way that we display a new number. If using the use project specific sequence numbering option, the sequence will remember the count across projects, ensuring that file naming will always be easy to define. A sequence number can be set as a project default value, making it even more easy to name files. Note that a sequence do not have to be a file name. It could be an item number which is added to the file properties. Another note is we can use the sequence in a combination property to even further drive the file name. We may need to do a webinar on the more advanced options to make this a lot more clear, but search our YouTube channel and I guess you will find some videos there regarding combination properties. So finally I want to show how the projects can be used to insert a node in our DXF conversions, for instance. So I will just get back to SOLIDWORKS again and then go into the options, and then this time go into the database options, and in here you find a custom nodes template. A custom node can be used to insert into drawings, or you can use it during a file conversion, and you can actually put quite a lot of information into one of these. So for laser cut info we have a predefined one. If I edit that, you can see that I have almost the same settings that I have for anything else, the file name and the combination properties. I can type in static text and then I can link values into this. So in this case I'm linking a project and a project name, so this is these two guys. I have material defined, and these actually come from SOLIDWORKS. So these are SOLIDWORKS properties. We have model properties, we have drawing properties, and we have cut list item properties. So we can put quite a few informations into this one. And if what you need does not already exist, there is a good chance that you can retrieve it by using a combination property. And this is why I have so many combination properties in my profile. But let me show you this one, which we are actually using in the next example. I'm retrieving the material and the sheet thickness, and this is in millimeters. Sorry for that. I have a total cutting length, and actually I need to add just a bit more information to this. And that is in millimeters. So I retrieved the project name and the project number, and then I retrieved the quantity. And for a part that does not make a lot of sense, because there would most likely be one, but if it's from an assembly, then you would get the actual bill of material count during your file conversion. So now I have this node defined, and where to use it? Well, in the profile options we have the file conversion. and I have a DXF project. For the DXF project, I'm using the DXF file type, and for conversion options, this is where I can display this custom node that I've created. So display custom node template to every view. I can use the web, or I could use any of the other two that I've defined, but we are using web for this one. And then again, a target file name, we are using a drawing path, converted files, DXF. So if this part does not exist, we can actually just create it when the file is converted. And it's the same as before, the little arrow to the right of the text field. We can add values into this to drive the file name. So we have the option to browse for a folder, we have the model properties, we have drawing properties, Webman properties, and then a bunch of system properties, we could call it, because these are defined by CustomTools. This one could be anything because they depend on your profile. We have option to execute the rule after a file is saved in SOLIDWORKS, and we can open the output directory, and how to handle if a file exists. Would we always, never, or would we like to be prompted before overwriting it? So this is how you can define your conversion rule, and this would be almost identical regardless of what you are defining. If it's a PDF, for instance, same interface. So let's put that to the test and see if we can create a DXF part from this bracket. I'm going to save it using my webinar. File code was retrieved, and I want to add material to this as well. So hit OK. The file is saved, and I can run my conversion now. Before I do that, actually, let me open this. So now you see the folder where the file is saved into, the webinar and the date. This folder does not contain any subfolders, but when I run the conversion, it will. So because I defined that in the rule to create the folders if they do not exist. So running the conversion. And now I get a folder called converted files. The DXF file sits in here, and I can open that. And we can see that the node was added to this DXF file. So we have the material, the sheet thickness, the project name, quantity, everything is defined in this file. Yeah, that's just about it. So a small recap again. By using custom nodes, we can insert project information to our converted files also. This makes it really easy for laser cutting to place the cut parts in correct locations. It even allows them to copy the node onto the surface in the laser cutting software to engrave the number if required. There is one more project option, but I do not have this in my setup, unfortunately. But we can actually retrieve the project info from an external source, for instance directly from EPDM or your ERP system. So we are not using what we have in this dialog. That would be overtaken by some external system. So if you create projects in Enterprise PDM, these would then be listed as you create them in EPDM. So this is a thing that we are going to make some kind of webinar, or maybe just a video about, that we will share for you on YouTube. So please make sure that you follow our Facebook or LinkedIn page for this upcoming webinar or video. Not sure what it's going to be. Okay, so that is all I had to show for you today. I hope you got inspired and not scared by the technical level in this webinar. As I said in the beginning, our goal was to show you how projects can be used and not how to define them. Thank you for attending the webinar, and hope to see all of you for the next one, scheduled at August 13th at the same time as today. We will have a look at the actions group, as I told you, and how to use these options. And I will now stop the recording and cover any questions you may still have. So